Welcome to the Looking Into Wine podcast and the fourth episode on English wine. Having spent a day in the sunniest Sussex to record this episode, I could sense why there are over 700 hectares of vineyard in this part of the country. These represent the largest concentration of vines in the UK, then planted on a wide variety of soils, including the free-drain chalks of the South Downs. This escarpment stretches across most of Sussex. It is part of a wider chalk system, includes the Salisbury Plains, the Island White and the North Downs. On the other side of the English Channel, the chalk reappears on the Parisian Basin where Champagne's vineyards are found. Sussex is classified as having a maritime climate and is one of the most sunny and warmest areas of England. I visited Wiston Estate and I met with Dermot Sugrue, the head winemaker. Wiston Estate started in 2006, planting on flint scatter soils over a chalk base. The Chardonnay, Pinot Noir and Pinot Noir vines are able to root deeply into these harsh, unforgiving soils. Let's talk about oak. Is the key point that took a good part of the episode, from pressing in an old barrel from Champagne to maturing the wines in well-seasoned oak. Wiston wines are deeply entrenched with oak, and Dermot is deeply passionate with them. So let's get into it now. But before that, remember to hit the subscribe button and to share this episode with your friends. Hi, I'm Mattia Scarpazza and this is the Looking Into Wine podcast. Wine and winemaking can be complex, but this podcast has a simple mission. We want to give you the skills and tools to harness your passion about wine. Through this series, we will shine a spotlight on some of the different regions, process and concepts that shape the fascinating world of wine. I hope you enjoy the show and your own journey looking into wine. Welcome to the Looking Into Wine podcast. Today's guest is the head winemaker of Wiston Estate in Sussex, as well as his own winery, Sugrue. As part of our English focus series, today we are exploring Sussex in the heart of the South Downs. In regards to my guest, he was called the best winemaker in England by the late Stephen Spurrier. Originally, he's from Limerick in South Ireland. I'm very happy to welcome to the show Dermot Sugrue. Welcome.
Hi Mattia, how are you doing?
Very good. It's so good to be here today and be in the estate here, and it's fantastic. It's a gorgeous day, and thank you for the tour, and thank you.
It's a pleasure. It's wonderful to be here on such a beautiful, sunny, luminous day on the South Downs.
Yeah. So how a boy from Ireland end up being making wine in south of England? What's the story?
Well, I blame the clergy because I was first introduced to wine by a member of the clergy, by a Protestant minister, an archdeacon rather, Brian Snow. I'd been making beer since I was 15 years of age, and I suddenly discovered that you could make wine, and that became my absolute passion. So throughout my schooling, that's what I was doing. I was making booze, basically, at home at my house in Ireland. And then I moved to England and I did a degree in environmental sciences. And after working in, funnily enough, financial services, wine just came flooding back into my life in my late 20s. And that's when I decided to do some vintages abroad.
Okay, and you started, your first experience was in Bordeaux. And then how do you end up being from the heart of red wines and white wine to making sparkling?
Again, it was a total accident. You know, I did a vintage. The first time I went to Bordeaux was in 2000. And then I went back and I did the vintage there. And then I was invited back by the late, great Anthony Barton to do vintage with them in 2002 in Saint-Julien. So 2001 was in Pomerol. 2002 was... at Leoval Barton, and that was an amazing experience, a transformational experience for me to spend time with Anthony and Lillian. Anthony, who passed away just last week. Spectacular people, spectacular family, and it gave me a brilliant attitude when I then came back to England and I realised that something completely new was happening in Sussex, in England at the time, and that, of course, was the rise to prominence of English sparkling wine as a result of the efforts of Nye Timber and the efforts of Ridgeview. So I've set my sights firmly on a career in English sparkling wine.
Great. And Wiston Estate, they started in 2006 for the first planting. Well, what was the decision? Do you know it? Why they decided to make sparkling here?
Well, I was at Nye Timber when I was approached by Harry and Pip Goring, who own the Wiston Estate. And they asked if it would be possible to plant a vineyard on their estate. So I came and I looked, and we spent a day driving around in a Land Rover. And then we settled. There's a lot of good opportunities for vineyards, to be vineyard sites. But then we found one. It's actually an old field called Pest House. Call it Findon Park Vineyard, and that's where we planted the first 6.5 hectares back in 2006.
Okay, how many hectares have you got at the moment? How much has expanded the venture?
Very, very little. 11 years later, in 2017, we planted another 3.5 hectares. 2.5 of Chardonnay in a terrific vineyard called Broadwoods, lower altitude than the initial vineyard, more protection from the southwesterly winds, so it'll actually be a warmer site. You know, if Findon Park is Premier Cru, then we're Grand Cru in Broadwoods. And then a lovely small little compact 1 hectare vineyard of Pinot Noir just around the winery. As you come in, we passed through it this morning. And that's entirely Pinot Noir, planted it that way. It's actually some of it's south, but some of it is directly west.
Okay.
So it gets a lot of evening and late afternoon sun and heat that's accumulated during the daytime. So that's a good vineyard, and we actually made red wine from it this year, remarkably for our rosé.
Amazing. And so just to picture where we are at the moment, we are just about 5 miles from the sea. We're just on the strait, and we are in the heartland of the South Downs, and they're famous for their white chalk. Do you have it in here? Is it found in your vineyards as well?
Absolutely. We are directly on the chalk here. If you look out and you can see the downs, this range of low, they're not mountains. The highest point is 220 meters. So really they're kind of rolling hills. But these are all, it's chalk. You go underneath the soil, 20 centimeters, 30 centimeters, you meet thick, white, hard. Well, it's not that hard. It crumbles a bit. Chalk, but basically it looks like the wall here or the radiator. It's pure white. And there's billions and billions of cubic meters of it all around here under your feet. So it's quite spectacular. To be on the chalk, you have to be on a little bit of elevated altitude. Okay. So we are here. So the 5 miles away, as you say, at Worthing Beach, let's say, it's 0 feet above sea level or meters above. But here we're rising. So we're about kind of 80 to 100 meters above sea level here, where the winery is. Yeah. But then where the first vineyard is, it's generally about 100 meters above sea level. Okay.
I mean, Sussex for me is incredible. It's just around the corner from my house, and I was so happy to be able to come down. It's great to be able to have vineyards now visitable here in England. It's just brilliant. So you have the classic grape variety of Champagne. You have the Chardonnay, the Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier as well. And do you also have you also have Bacchus, don't you?
No, we didn't actually plant any Bacchus. We won't rule that out, because we made a Bacchus last year with some fruit that I bought from another vineyard. 2 other vineyards, actually, one of them in Essex and the other in West Sussex, in order to make what is effectively Wiston's first white wine, which is called Tank 5. So this is a Bacchus and Chardonnay blend. It's rather a Chardonnay Bacchus blend, because it's about 60% Chardonnay, 40 Bacchus. And this is really, really interesting project.
Yeah,
for me
I will be looking forward to try it later. It looks incredible.
Absolutely. This is me outside of my comfort zone and making a still wine.
Yeah. And what else do you drawn for? Obviously the grapes, but you use quite a lot of champagne technique to make your wines. What else have you drawing? What are you drawing from champagne when you make your wines for your winemaking?
Yeah, well, it could be said I've done one vintage in Champagne, and that was in 2006. But prior to that, I actually learned how to make sparkling wine, traditional method sparkling wine, from working alongside a champenois, a winemaker, Jean-Manuel Jacquinot. So what I learned and my introduction, my understanding of sparkling wine winemaking is coming from the French rather than coming from England, rather than coming from Italy or anywhere else. So I kind of was raised élevage in the French model, the French school of sparkling winemaking, and Champagne has had a massive impact on my career since I was a young winemaker. I've visited there countless times. I've bought lots of kit there. I've got loads of friends there, either within the industry or outside of the industry. It's always been it's been a happy place for me to visit over the decades. I haven't been there in about 3 years now. So, but then again, nobody's been anywhere in about 3 years now. But hopefully that'll change, because I want to take my fiance there, and so we can immerse ourselves in champagne culture.
Sounds great. And so we're having a wine on the table, which is your Wiston Estate, no vintage. What are we having in the glass, and what's the blend? And tell me a bit more.
So this is our signature wine. It's the wine we make most of. It's a wine I adore making every year, because it's comprised of the most amount of component parts. The style and the philosophy is quite simple. It's a brut non-vintage cuvée of the 3 varieties, more or less in equal proportions. So 1/3 Chardonnay, 1/3 Pinot Noir, 1/3 Pinot Meunier. Now that's unusual to have such a high level of Pinot Meunier in English sparkling wines, or certainly in the non-vintage of UK wine, because there's not much Pinot Meunier planted. There's a lot of Pinot Noir, a lot of Chardonnay, not much Meunier. So I like to have a high quantity here. It gives the wine a lovely kind of fruity and fragrant basis. Then gets a bit more structure from the Pinot, and then this lovely elegant freshness coming from the 3 varieties. So I'm kind of championing all 3 varieties at the same time in this. But what's very, very important in the wine then brings it that kind of savoury element is the reserve wine. So about 30% of the reserve wine in here is a blend. I showed you the tank downstairs.
What is your reserve? It's very interesting. Your solera.
It's a solera. Yeah, it's like a perpetual solera in tank on its lees that contains every single vintage that we've had at Wiston Estate since 2008. Okay. So in this reserve wine here, so the main part of the wine, 70% is based on the 2017 vintage. But then the reserve wine will contain wine from 16, 15, 14, 13, there's no 12 because we didn't harvest anything. 11, 10, 9 and 8 is in. So every sip and every glass of Wiston, you're tasting every vintage of Wiston.
Oh wow, that's amazing. And this is something you find, is a champagne thing they do this solera system, or is something you're developing?
I'd certainly read about it, and then it kind of happened by accident because it seemed the most practical thing to do. It's difficult at the start when you're a young winery in England to actually put away reserve wine. It's a difficult thing because some years you have awful years and you don't have enough wine to bottle, let alone keep some reserve wine. Then when you have big years, you're able to do it. And it becomes logical, and then you realize the quality of what you have in that reserve wine tank, and that's what makes you really that's what made me really excited about it, because the wines from the current vintage, they're always going to be displaying lovely fruit qualities and purity, and detail from the vintage in that wine, but they're very much fruit forward and focused. Whereas the reserve wine, sitting on its lees in a reductant environment in the tank, is showing all these crazy marine and reductive saline flavors. And when you put the two of these elements together, you get something fascinating.
Yeah, it's definitely very beautiful sparkling wine. I'm really enjoying tasting this, and I can sense that it has maturity in it from possibly the reserve. How long has it been? How long do you do your aging on average for your non-vintage and vintage?
So we love to be about 4 years. I can tell you now that this was disgorged in November of 21, so it was disgorged only 2 months ago. It's rather young and fresh. But let me think. So this would have been bottled in July 18, July 19, July 20, July 21. Yeah, so it's only 2.5 years on lease. So it's young. It's got the reserve wine in there. It's only 2.5 years on lease. And but it's showing it's in a very good place.
Absolutely. Now it's showing this maturity. So tell me a bit more about Sussex and what draws to you to Sussex. Why do you think Sussex can be the place, or why it can continue?
I think, when I realized what was going on here, you have Night Timber, you have Ridgeview, you have all these other wineries and vineyards that are springing up. Kent, East Sussex, West Sussex, Hampshire. This is where the biggest concentration of those are. When I started to go to Plumpton College back in 2003, I was working at a vineyard and a winery up in Suffolk at the time, so I was driving up and driving down while studying at Plumpton. And I realised that I was one of the only ones. It's funny enough, myself, Emma Rice and Fred Langdale were the only ones of our year of 30 who were working at vineyards and wineries whilst we were at Plumpton College. Oh, yeah. And the three of us couldn't understand why the other 27 people weren't working at wineries. And they kind of said, oh no, we'll wait till we do our degree first and then we'll get a job. And I was thinking, that's not the way that I would kind of operate, because there's so many opportunities to work and learn, and that's how I learn. I learn by working with experienced people. So I started working at Night Timber immediately as assistant winemaker, and that forged the career for me there. But you just got to look at these natural assets that we have here, particularly in Sussex. Yeah. Both East Sussex and West Sussex. It's extraordinary, this chalk soil. We've got, in Harry and Pip Goring and now the next generation, Rick and Kirsty Goring. We've got people who are, farmers, traditional farming families who are committed to the land and committed to sustainably managing the land that they have around here. So to have that kind of mindset in leading what is necessarily a project that takes generations to define itself and sustain itself, to have their attitude is perfect. And it suited me right down to the ground, because I suppose having had the education I did have in Bordeaux, which is related to family dynasties lasting over a long time. It suits
the Goring family owns the Wiston Estate, you were telling me, since 15th century. Definitely it's part of their blood, this estate, and they want to maintain it. And the extensive work you showed me here, and the new visit area looks gorgeous, the restaurant, and there's definitely this interest to make Wiston a centerpiece for wines and the tourism. I mean, obviously there's going to be more and more interest, and people coming from London and outside of England as well. Hopefully we start seeing Wiston abroad, and I don't know if it's anywhere else than in UK already, so that's obviously something great. So I was really interested to hear about your approach for oak for your wines, but I think we can try your vintage wine.
Absolutely, I think this is a great thing to taste the senior after the junior. Because there's a lot of similarities in this wine. to the brut non-vintage, but there's also a lot of contrasts. The similarities really are that this is 2/3 Pinot grapes and 1/3 Chardonnay, like the brut non-vintage. However, there's more Pinot Noir in here. There's about twice the amount of Pinot Noir as there is Pinot Meunier, so close to 50% of Pinot Noir. But importantly, whereas the brut non-vintage has gone through, has been spent all of its life in stainless steel, this wine has spent all of its life in Burgundy barrels, 228-litre Burgundy barrels.
Okay. So they've been aged in Burgundy barrels for the base wine. It's all aged in Burgundy barrels, which I think is quite great. I mean, it's brilliant. Is there something that you know of? Is something done in the UK, or is you one of the few?
I think nowadays lots of people are doing this, and I think it's a great idea, because what I learned very, very early on in my career was that English base wine for English sparkling wine reacted really, really well in barrels, not necessarily young, new barrels, because that can overwhelm the delicate nature of English wines. But certainly in old barrels, 3-year-old barrels, 5, 10-year-old barrels works really, really well. It helps to absorb the acidity, if you like, and integrate it into the wine, and creates this beautiful supple texture to the wine.
Oh, it smells gorgeous. Just open now.
Absolutely springing out of the glass, so floral and lovely.
And I know you've drawn a lot to Blanc de Blanc. What do you think about the Chardonnay grown here in the UK?
So one thing that I like to do, I adore Chardonnay, and I'm kind of recognised as somebody who is a bit obsédé with Chardonnay. But I love having contrasts in wines, and that's why with this cuvée, in very, very many ways, it's the polar opposite of the Blanc de Blanc. But because it's richer, it's broader, it has more structure. And I want to even enhance that by putting it in oak and giving the wine more amplitude and breadth. Whereas with the Blanc de Blanc, I want to make that go in a completely different direction. So I keep some stainless steel element in the Blanc de Blanc. And I'll do maybe a portion of malolactic and non-malolactic. Whereas here, generally, for the Cuvée vintage, and here we're on Cuvée vintage 2017, 100% older or Burgundy barrels and no malolactic.
Oh, it just smells delicious. I'm going to try some. Oh, that's a lovely bubble. I know he's not making great content the poses, but it's just ought to stop it for a second and enjoy it. It's amazing.
Rich yet really fresh. It's crispy and it's got depth to it. It's floral. It's got a lovely green note going through it, which it gives the wine this lovely tension. Yeah, I'm really, really happy with this wine. It's in a brilliant place.
What about the 2020 vintage? I heard from many other producers it was being a tough vintage, but did it finish okay? How was the harvest?
2020 was magnificent, but maybe you're talking about 21 just last year.
2021, yeah.
2021 was really challenging. Yeah. Really, really challenging. One of the most challenging for me since 2012, which was an absolute disaster. Yeah, 21. There was just so much disease pressure early in the year. Yeah. I've never seen it. Never seen botrytis on leaves so early in the year. Okay. Normally we see botrytis on the grapes late in the year. Yeah. But actually those initial primary infections started very early on. And then we had so much rain. It rained and it rained consistently throughout August and September. So it was just desperate. Yeah, I didn't enjoy 21 at all, but 2020 was absolutely magnificent.
Yeah, that shows the difference from vintage to vintage, and especially in the UK, it's such a marginal growing condition, and if anything happens, can really create a very small production. I mean, English wine are quite famous to very low yield already, so very poor vintages. You really have very little to work with. And so how is this looking for this year? What are you hoping for? What would be an ideal
I think, the vines will be a little bit stressed from last year, from the disease. So pruning is very, very important. In many instances, we've got to prune the vines quite hard because the quality of the wood left from last year is suboptimal. So with careful pruning, we've just got to hope that we don't have too early a bud burst, because we're not so affected by frost here. We're very, very lucky because we're so close to the sea. Yeah. But for other vineyards, if the buds burst too early, then they're very, very susceptible to having spring frost. So that's the main hurdle to get over. And after that, who knows? We shall see. It's like the rugby. It's like the Six Nations. Nobody knows what will happen.
Right. And you have the only I'm gonna butcher the name. The Coquard press. Coquard press here in the UK. Yeah. What? How does it work? What is it, and why do you wanted it?
Okay. So when I did that vintage in Champagne in 2006, we were working with a 6-ton Coquard press. There's actually 2 of them side by side, and these presses are like over 100 years old. No, that's a lie. They were 1928, so at the time they were like 80 years old, something like this. And it was really, really hard work. You're doing everything manually. You're loading manually. Whilst one is pressing, you're breaking the cake on the other one. So it's almost continuous work with forks and with the big cousteau, the boys who do the harvest in Champagne every year. And I did that for 2 weeks, and it was exhausting. But I just thought, wow, this is great. The quality of juice is wonderful. You're manually working with the grapes with your fork. So you're treating them as gently as you choose to treat them, rather than the machine doing it in a specific way. And I thought when we built the winery here, or rather converted this old building, this old abattoir, into a winery, I could pick up one of these cheap. I mean, it was for a press that was 10,000 euros. Okay, it cost an awful lot more by the time it was transported to England and then created, commissioned here over 3 days and put on the first floor. And one of the reasons why I wanted it was because I could put it on the first floor, so I could let gravity, the juice fall into the tanks underneath by gravity.
Okay.
And it's also, it not only does it produce fantastic juice for sparkling wine, it also looks amazing, and it is a piece of winemaking history, in our winery here. Nobody else has one in the UK, or at least nobody had one until very, very recently, other than us getting it in 2008. And we like to put as much of the Wiston fruit through it as we possibly can each harvest. So what's in your glass here will have been pressed.
So what are the advantages of the Coquard is being super gentle and super controlled? And I mean, I'm going to post some picture on the Instagram account, and you can see there's like, it looks like an open barrel with the press on top. It's huge. It's amazing. How many liters or how many kilograms can you sort of press at a time? What's the capacity?
So it's a classic basket press with a hydraulic ram and a big disc that's coming down, a horizontal disc. It's a 4-ton press, so we'll put 4,000 kilos of grapes in there. That will allow us to press more or less half of that is the best quality juice that you'll get, about 2,000 litres from that 4,000. And then we press about another 500 litres, which is then declining in quality. We call it the Premier Thai and the Deuxième Thai. But one of the other aspects which I think makes the press different, or, the way that the juice is managed throughout the pressing process is, if you think of it, grapes are exposed to the atmosphere throughout the pressing process, which is often like 3.5, maybe 4 hours long. So they're getting exposure to oxygen, and whereas in a membrane press they're not. They're completely sealed up. And I get the feeling that this exposure to oxygen early in the life of what will become wine, because it's juice, is actually protecting it. It's like inoculating it, vaccinating it against oxidation later on in its life, because the wines we've made through this press have shown fantastic longevity so far. You know, where when I taste the wines that I made in 2008 and 9 and 10, so what's that, 14, 13, 12 years ago?
Yeah.
They're just in such great shape, you know. I think it's a combination of that and the acidity we have, the low pH that we have in England.
It's a bit higher than champagne. I mean, I tend necessarily with English wine, I always found them slightly more lighter end compared to champagne, but also acidity is a bit higher compared to champagne, especially now that champagne is getting a bit warmer. There's more shift towards England. I mean, you have some projects coming out from England of champagne houses, which definitely is going to bring raise the interest even more. And it's good to be here now before everything happens. And it's good for Wiston to be here and many of the existing wineries. For me, it's a very interesting place to be. So what is the future for, what is the next experiment? What are you looking at? What is
Well, what we've just done here before Christmas, opening a restaurant, Chalk Restaurant on Wiston Estate, is a massive big deal for us. It really is. It culminates the dream of Pip Goring, who, when she came here in 1972 and married Harry Goring, to not just plant a vineyard, not just create a winery, but to then open a restaurant, and a visitor centre, a meeting place, a place where people could come. Because funnily enough, there aren't that many of them around here that offer fantastic food and offer a visitor experience like we can do here. We're a very, very hospitable bunch. We love people. We love to show people what we're really proud of, and people respond very well to it. So having the restaurant, serving delicious food, and serving our wines, and then allowing people to be able to do tours and tastings and things like this, and eventually to stay on the estate, accommodation for people to stay on the estate close to the vineyard. It's a big deal for us. So yeah, we'll keep chewing on that one for a while before branching out into other things.
And you're also making your own sparkling wine, which I thought before closing the interview I would love to try it, and I haven't actually tried it before, and I think it's exciting.
Fantastic. Yeah, I do. The year that I started the project with Wiston here with Harry and Pip, I had planted a small vineyard over in Storrington, just where, funnily enough, the chalk meets green sand on the downs. And I named this small little 1 hectare vineyard, the project name was The Trouble with Dreams. I've been producing the Trouble with Dreams since that first 2009 vintage, and it's working out very, very well.
So what's the blend? What is the winemaking? I expect some wood in it.
There is, yeah. So generally I'm using about 50% oak barrels in this, but not in this vintage we're about to taste. This is, again, 2017 vintage of Trouble with Dreams, when I had a bad harvest affected by frost and poor flowering, so I actually got some fruit in from Hampshire. So this is a blend of fruit from West Sussex, East Sussex, and Hampshire from 2017. Chardonnay dominant here. So the wines we've tasted to date have been Pinot dominant. This is Chardonnay dominant, around about 60%. And this is The Trouble with Dreams. Completely different places here. We've got some in Storrington, and we've got fruit which is in West Sussex, and then we've got fruit coming from East Sussex, Mount Harry Vineyard, just between Plumpton and Lewis.
Great. Great. So it's the first time I'm trying it, and it smells great. I can see the imprint, your imprint of wood, touch of wood in it, and the interest depth. And I want to, while we were talking, it makes me think, do you think in the future we would have a situation like in Champagne where, like, Côte de Bar or where we have like Sussex predominantly Chardonnay, or maybe Kent becoming more Pinot Noir based? Do you think that would be something you see in England, where like different part of England becoming famous for a different grape?
I think so, but it's going to take a long time.
Yeah.
A long time, because that's happened over hundreds of years, over centuries, and in some cases millennia in the oldest regions of France. To absolutely refine what varieties are best in those areas. I've got a faint idea myself of what I would do. I think that places like Kent can produce fantastic Pinot Meunier. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that they can't produce fantastic Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. I would prefer to grow Pinot Meunier in lower altitude and darker, richer, heavier soils. Then I would prefer to try and put it up in the downs here in the chalk, whereas Chardonnay in particular and Pinot Noir will really thrive on chalkier soils, high pH, more limestone. But Champagne is such with the exception of the Côte d'Ivoire in the south, all the northern part of Champagne and the Montagne de Reims and the Val de la Marne and the Côte de Blanc, they're all really close together.
Yeah.
And they've got wildly different characteristics in terms of their the weather systems, maybe not necessarily their climate, but the weather systems. And they've worked that out over the years, what is best to put here and what's best to put there. In England, all of the vineyards, they're very spread out. They're little dots on the map. They're not contiguous and connected. So people will always plant their Chardonnay, their Pinot in the same place. And then the vintage variation is so great in England that one year it'll be, it's a great year for Pinot Noir. And the next is, it's a great year for Chardonnay, that type of thing. So I think it'll take a long time before we know. And I think, but what people do know is that for sparkling wine, these three varieties are the ones to work with. And then I think the still wine situation is a little bit more open at the moment, because lots of people have planted Bacchus. In years that are very ripe, we can use Chardonnay and Pinot Noir to make white and red wines and not just sparkling wines. And then there's this whole new generation of opportunity with peewee varieties. Are you familiar with these?
You can definitely explain it better than me, but I'm sort of know with.
They're vine crosses. They're not strictly vinifera crosses, but they've been bred in laboratories by crossing, popular varieties with other varieties that have got very strong disease resistance. So they're basically low spray vines, things like tin and Savignac, I think it's called. Basically, they are virtually resistant to downy mildew, powdery mildew, and to an extent botrytis.
Okay. Wow.
And these are the kind of things that maybe could be the future of the English still wine industry, apart from Chardonnay and Pinot. They're very interesting, and we just need to plant these varieties, and some people are planting them, and then winemakers like me and the rest of my peers need to start working with these unusual varieties to see how good they can be.
Okay, well, definitely I can see the appealing there, because obviously England is quite prone with, you were saying earlier, in some vintages with diseases and fungus, so I think definitely I can see the appealing there. But I mean, Dermot, I can sense we could talk all afternoon, and here is such a lovely day. I could sit here all day, but I'd love to wrap it up maybe with the last wine, then we can talk about that.
I'd love to show you this wine here, Mathieu, because this is Wiston's. This is a wine that I've only made for Wiston in 2009, 2010, and here we go in 2014, and it's our Blanc de Noir. So, whilst I talk about Chardonnay being exceptional, we do good Blanc de Noir here as well, and I'm extremely proud of this. This is a 2014 Wiston Estate Blanc de Noir. Okay. It's about 2/3 Pinot Noir and 1/3 Pinot Meunier, and again, it's 100% fermented and aged in small Burgundy barrels.
So this is the Blanc de Noir 2014. Okay. Ooh, that smelled deep and profound, quite.
I like to describe it as a brontosaurus of a wine. it's a vegetable eating dinosaur of a wine.
Such a good way to finish the interview. It's just been fantastic to be here today and to speak about Wiston, your projects and the future about this region. I'm very excited to see what is going to happen in the next 10, 15, 20 years in England, and I'm very happy to be here today and wishing all the best to Wiston, the wines of Sussex and the future of England, and to yourself.
Thank you, Mattia. This is excellent for you to come down. I look forward to coming up to Petersham Nurseries and we can have a glass of English fizz together.
Cheers. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you. Thank you, buddy. Cheers.
You have listened to the Looking Into Wine podcast with Dermot Sugrue of Wiston Estate and Sugrue Wine in Sussex, UK. If you enjoyed this podcast, remember to subscribe and to share it on social media and your friends. And you can find on Looking Into Wine on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music and every major listening app. If you enjoyed the podcast, you can donate on mattiascarpazza.com. The next episode will be the last of our mini-series on English wine with Simpsons in Kent. Music produced by Samuele Di Nardo, editing and mastering by Tommaso Ascoli.